Hey everyone, welcome back to another part of this series where I'm showing you kind of the progress I've been making on this NFT-Magic application I've been building out to help users mint and generate their own NFT collections. So in the previous video, I think like part 1 or part 2 or something, I showed you the generator project where basically you can upload a zip file that has all your layers, and it takes those layers, it combines them and stitches them together to form your unique random NFTs, and then it sends back a zip that has all of your image NFTs and metadata NFTs. Over the past couple of days, I've just been focusing on refactoring a lot of that code because it used to be prototyped code and I wanted to make it more production ready. So I took that code and I basically wrapped it in serverless so I can easily deploy it whenever I want. And additionally, I started writing some unit tests. So the best way to write production ready code is to have testing to cover your code, right? If you don't have tests covering your code's probably not quality, or you have a high chance of breaking something very easily just by changing a line or two. So that's kind of why I'm focusing on writing some tests to be able to, verify that the stuff I'm deploying actually works. So that's the main thing I'm going to be talking about in this video, is the refactoring I did to take it from a prototype state to an actual like production ready deployed onto Amazon state. The NFT generator code used to be hosted on its own Express application that I had hosted on a DigitalOcean droplet. I'm trying to move away from that and just get everything to be managed by AWS Lambdas and AWS in general. So the NFT generator, I added a new header up here where you can click on it and it takes you to that old view, right? So this is the same view that we saw in like part 1 or part 2 of the series, where a user can upload a zip file, and that zip file will be basically used to generate a bunch of different NFTs. And the process now is a little bit different. It kind of matches the NFT minting system. Again, let me take a step back. There's 2 different systems I'm building out in this series. I have this NFT generator, which is its own like isolated system that's deployed with serverless. And the idea is that this system is just used for generating these NFT zips. And the NFT minter actually takes the zip that's created in this part and will actually deploy a contract and mint all your NFTs. So they're 2 separate systems that are deployed and managed separately. And the main reason I want to do that is so I don't want to break the minting thing by changing some code in the generator and vice versa. I'm trying to separate these concerns and make it easier to manage and potentially reduce the blast radius if I break some code. So I've been spending a lot of time refactoring the minter to get it all into Amazon, make it all hosted on API Gateway and using serverless to deploy the API, and also using Lambdas to process and generate these zips. Let me show you this. I don't know if it's fully working right now. It was working at some point today, but I probably broke something. I'm too lazy to go back and git revert for this video. So if I upload a zip that has all of these layers in it, what this first does is it hits a pre-signed URL endpoint, which actually that went really quick. So let me just go ahead and save this into my downloads real quick. Let's go back. So it hits a pre-signed URL, and that is going to allow us to upload a zip file to a private S3 bucket, right? I kind of talked about this in previous videos, but just go ahead and talk about it again. But once you got that pre-signed URL, let me kind of share that with you. This is something that you get from just running the Amazon SDK S3 library, and it gives you a URL and some fields. So you can kind of use all that data to send a post request to the bucket here, which is what I'm doing. I'm doing a post request to the bucket, and I'm sending my multi-part upload, which contains the file. So after that point, it hits a third endpoint called process. This is the actual endpoint that kicks off the entire system to kind of take your zip that has all your layers, generate your random NFT DNAs, I guess you can call them, and then use the DNA to generate a ton of images and stitch them together at a later point. And when that's all done running, we get back another URL. This URL is actually a short-lived, like I think 180-second URL where you have to download the zip file within 180 seconds. It's another pre-signed Git URL, but you saw here it opened up a new tab and I could download that to my downloads. So let me see if I can demo that real quick. If I double-click on this NFT's zip file, that will unzip it, and we can see here we have a bunch of images that are just kind of faces right now, and they're really low resolution because I wanted to kind of make this run quick. They're 100 by 100, and they also have metadata JSON files attached to them. So that is what the NFT generating part of this system is doing. And I did kind of talk about this in detail in some other videos. So if you're interested in kind of going back and relearning about that, feel free to go back to part 1 or part 2, part 3 of the series. But let me give you an overview of like the code changes, right? So what actually happened in the code? So in this folder, I used to have an API here, and this API was an actual Express API hosted on a DigitalOcean VM. This used to handle taking in the request or taking in the image uploaded, which had all the layers, and then extracting the data from that and generating all the DNAs. And then that would push events to an SQS queue. Actually, I don't think I'd use SQS. That would push events to Lambdas, and Lambdas would just concurrently process and generate these NFT images. And then finally, we aggregate them all together in a final zip and send that back to the user. So the demo I just showed you is a little bit different behind the scenes. And let's kind of figure out what's going on. So I have a generator folder here, which basically wraps up all that code. And I have a single serverless file, which is responsible for deploying that code. So if we look at this generator, it does have a lot of code that's commented out, which I actually need to clean up. Let me just clean this up real quick. It's gonna take me more than like 5 seconds. All right, that's a little bit cleaner. So basically, this serverless YAML is going to deploy an API. So the API is used for getting that pre-signed post URL for uploading the zip. And then it also has a bucket. So this is where I'm kind of uploading all the bucket or all the files that the users upload. And then when I kind of extract them and create the NFTs, I'm also uploading these little NFTs back to this bucket. I think I'm also uploading the chunks to this bucket too, okay? So really in Amazon, this generator doesn't have too much logic that's deployed, not too many resources, just mainly an API, a bucket, and then there is also this worker thing that I kind of talked about in a previous video, which I believe is called Stitcher. I renamed it from worker to Stitcher. And again, I created a serverless file for the Stitcher to make sure that this is all managed and deployed in CloudFormation using serverless. So again, all this does is create a single Lambda that is basically going to take in events and create these NFT images using Node Canvas. And the generator calls this Lambda, right? So I have 2 folders, 2 separate deployments, and this kind of allows me to easily just work on one piece of the system and deploy it in isolation if I need to. So I already talked about the Stitcher in a previous video, so I won't really go back and talk about that. But some things I did change about the generator is, although it's all deployed to Amazon, I also started adding some tests. So if I go into source and go into routes, you'll see I started adding some test files over my routes and over my code. Like I said, adding tests is the best way to verify your code does what it's supposed to do. Because before I had tests, what I had to do is I had to keep on deploying this to Amazon and then check if it worked. And it really took a long time. It's like the feedback cycle was really long, and it took me a while to figure out if I had a bug or not. So I decided to just write some unit tests to verify that this code does what it's supposed to do. All right, so anyone who's a beginner out there, that's the best way I would recommend to start learning how to code, is to learn about testing and test-driven development, because it really helps hold your hand when you're actually implementing the logic. Now the logic I kind of simplified a lot. There's a lot of ugly code in the prototype that I had before. I simplified it and I made it really easy and elegant to read. So basically this generate NFT route is that process endpoint that we're calling from the UI. And all that's doing is it's grabbing the S3 file that the user uploaded. So here it kind of grabs the file and then it unzips the file to a temporary directory. It gets the configuration file. It verifies that the configuration doesn't have a total that's too high, because I don't want users trying to mint or generate 50,000 NFTs, because that costs money on Amazon, right? So I want to limit them unless they potentially pay me a tip or pay me some percentage of, how many things they're minting, because all these have to run in Lambdas, and these Lambdas cost money to run. So I don't want to have anyone just uploading zips and just burning up my bank account. So after all those zips are created, after the config is kind of checked, we generate a bunch of NFT DNAs and we chunk them up. And this file right here is basically calling that Stitcher library that we talked about. So this is like a separate Lambda that's running that takes in an event, and it basically takes the images or the layers that it needs to combine together, and using a library called Node Canvas, it just puts them all into a canvas and then it exports a PNG, and then also exports a metadata file, okay? So after this, let's say you're trying to mint 10,000 NFTs or generate 10,000 NFTs, you'll get back, 100 different chunks. I'm chunking up this work so I can do parallel processing on it. So this might be 100, an array of 100, or it might be equal to the number that's 100. And after that, we basically make a directory called output. We archive all of the zip files that are in the NFTs folder, and we put them into a nfts.zip file, and then we upload that zip file to S3. And then we do some cleanup by clearing out the temp directory. Because this runs in a Lambda, you have access to a /tmp directory, but everything that you put in that file or in that directory could potentially stick around for a long time. So you want to make sure you clean up your temp files before you allow the next execution of your Lambda to run. So I do a bunch of deleting and cleanup, and then finally I get that pre-signed get URL, which we saw in the UI. Now I did want to talk about one thing. I started going in the path of adding TypeScript because I thought it would help me. But honestly, I spent like an hour just trying to figure out the correct way to configure TypeScript to Node. Like every time I try to go a step forward, I have to go 2 steps backwards because like this wasn't working. And honestly, like I understand the benefits to typed languages or strongly typed languages. And I do recommend using them if you're a beginner. Like I love Java. Java, I think, was a really great language. People hate on it, but it's strongly typed and it's really easy to understand. But the issue I have with TypeScript is that it seems like a Frankenstein construct of just hacking stuff together. Like the configuration is not straightforward. If you're doing something on Node, you have to configure it differently than if you're doing something on the UI. And it just turns into a big mess, especially since a lot of the stuff in TypeScript is optional. Like you don't have to, define types or interfaces in TypeScript. It's just like left up to the developer. So it's really a loosely, potentially non-typed, but it has the ability to be strongly typed. And it just turns into a mess, right? Unless you have like linting set up to make sure your TypeScripts are like everything is typed and you don't use the word any, it's just a giant waste of time in my opinion. But I might be just kind of going off on a tangent here. Basically, if you have tests that verify your interfaces, so an interface is like a function that takes in a couple arguments. If you test those interfaces, there's really not a strong argument for having TypeScript or any type of strongly typed language because your test should fail the moment you change those interfaces. It helps you with refactoring and stuff, but okay, let me just get off that topic. I could probably talk too much about that. So I had this persistence folder where I basically took all the lower level methods that write from S3, read from S3, write to disk, read from disk, delete from disk. I put that in a persistence folder, and all these are really humble objects. All they do is just take in some arguments and call another function. Now the reason I did that is that it allowed my main, my main endpoint to be very clean. It's very easy to read through this code and understand what's going on because everything just calls a utility helper function. The second reason I did that is it helps with testing. Now it makes it super easy for me to mock out all of these, disk IO operations and network IO operations by just saying just mock of the file. And that's it. I can mock it out and I can make it just not actually hit S3 if I want to. So if you want to learn how to write professional code, I definitely recommend that you follow this type of approach. You can take it a step further by using like clean architecture or taking like dependency inversion, dependency injection, but sometimes that just adds so much complexity, especially if you're just learning how to code, that it's just not worth it. So just mock it out here in Jest and everything should just be fine. Yeah, so that's kind of all I wanted to show you with that. I do plan to go back with the Minter. I don't remember what I showed you last with the Minter, but I plan to do a full demo if everything's working fine. I'm going to go in, I'm going to create some layers here in Figma. I'm going to export them, and then I'm going to import them into my NFT generator here. And then I'm going to basically take the zip that's generated from my generator, and I'm going to upload that to my Minter. Okay, so this is the other UI I kind of demoed before where you can create a collection and then you can actually upload that zip and then pay a little bit of Ethereum or, Matic since I'm doing the Polygon network. And that is going to basically take that zip, create a contract for you, mint all your NFTs, and then, send you your contract address and other stuff like that. I will do a demo on this NFT Minter because I did do a lot of stuff behind the scenes, which I don't think I actually demoed on yet. I don't think I actually shared that with you on a YouTube video. That's about it. And then I want to kind of add an about page and a support page because if I do have people paying for this service, I need a way for them to contact me if they run into issues. And then I also want to just make sure I test the heck out of this because what I don't want to do is, allow people to upload zips and then either my Amazon bill goes through the roof because I didn't have the correct things in place to prevent or rate limit people, or people's zips just start failing and then they, have paid me money, but they're not getting an actual product in return. So I want to make sure all this stuff is pretty good before I actually host this and, put it in front of a URL. And then I do plan to get like an actual domain for this. I haven't really thought about it too much though. And then of course I want to work a better landing page. This page is just like a random bootstrap component I threw in there, but I do want to work on this page to make it more professional, kind of convince people that they should mint their NFTs with this system and kind of explain like I use IPFS behind the scenes, blah, 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 whatever. Like always, if you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to give me a thumbs up because it helps my channel grow and promotes my video in the YouTube algorithm. Also, Be sure to leave a comment below if you have an idea or suggestion of what I can do next with this project, or what you want to see added to this project. And like always, if you're new to this channel, press that subscribe button and that bell icon, because I'm going to have other videos like this in the future that should help you become a better web developer and kind of share some insight along the way with building a real life application. All right, happy coding and have a good day.